Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today I want to deal with a question that I get more than any other question. I get it from people on both sides of the border. I get it from retailers. I get it from viewers. I get it from fellow Canadian knife enthusiasts. The number one question I get from Instagram, Facebook, email, YouTube comments, all of the above is, how are you getting knives into Canada? Okay, how, and there's an assumption there that I think is mistaken in the first place, but we'll talk about that in a second. But the fact is, I don't really do anything special to import knives into Canada, but there are some things that you can and should know about. So if you are a fellow Canadian who's thinking about ordering something from the US, if you're someone in the US, maybe a retailer, maybe a knife enthusiast who's looking at selling to someone in Canada, by the way, please do that. It's a huge help to us up here. I know it's a pain in the neck if something bad happens, but I'll explain that it's not like the knife is going to be lost. No one's really out any, huge amount of money. It's going to be okay. So we'll talk about that. Or maybe you're just someone who's kind of interested. Maybe you're new to knives in Canada and you're wondering whether you should look at Canadian sources or US sources. And the fact is, look at both. Okay, whenever I can, I do order from Canadian sources. It's just that, man, that extra money you have to pay, not only for the markup. Knives tend to be, probably 20% more from the average Canadian retailer than they are from the average American retailer. But in addition to that, you're also going to be paying taxes on top of that, and you're generally going to be paying higher shipping fees because even the shipping costs more. I'm going to move that blade out of the way because it's messing up the lighting. So there we go. Okay, so let me run down a few simple points here that hopefully will answer many of the questions that are out there, and I can save myself a little bit of time and energy typing these answers all the time. So the first thing is, when you ship a knife to Canada, or when you're in Canada and you order a knife and have it shipped to you, look, you are taking a risk. No doubt, there is a chance that CBSA is going to stop your knife, whatever knife it is, okay? The only really safe knife is a fixed blade. And that's really frustrating, but frankly, the way CBSA and really the way the Canadian International Trade Tribunal has worded their criteria, it is so vague as to be almost meaningless. Okay, so it really amounts to CBSA having carte blanche. So it could be a Swiss Army knife. It doesn't matter. They can just say, nope, this is prohibited, and you really don't have much say, okay? It's really that bad that they specifically worded it in such a way that there's very little you can do if CBSA says this knife is not coming in. Okay, so so that's out of the way. You are taking a risk. It's not a huge risk, and the reason it's not a huge risk is, number one, if it is stopped, it's simply a matter of contacting UPS, and to my knowledge, UPS is pretty much the only people that'll do it for you. Sometimes, if you get the wrong agent, they're ignorant and don't know. But so I actually had one UPS person say, no, we can't do that. And they just didn't know. All right, so I ended up talking to their manager, and it was fine. So you'll go through UPS. You'll have to have the UPS driver go to the location in Montreal where most of these inspections take place, pick up your item, and it has to go back to the original shipper. Okay, that's a stipulation. You can't be like, well, I'm just going to send it to, my friend Bob in the US. That won't work. It has to go back to the original shipper. All right, and there is a cost associated with that. The last time it happened to me, I think it was about $35. So it's not the end of the world. Okay, I guess it would kind of suck if it was this knife here. I basically spent $35 on it, and so I'm out the cost of the knife. But most of these others, that's not the case. So that's the first thing you need to know. Even if the worst happens and CBSA does say you can't have this knife, it's not a big deal. Just ship it back to the shipper and have other arrangements in place in case that happens. And that's one thing you should do is, if you're ordering a lot of stuff all the time, especially from the same person, you should say to them, hey, there is a chance a package will get stopped. If it ever happens, I'll just ship it back to you and we'll make other arrangements. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, another reason it's not a huge risk is that most knives are getting through. Okay, all of these knives got through with no issue. All right, and in fact, this one as well as this one were both opened and inspected by CBSA. And they didn't. This one I did have to pay duty on. This one, though, they opened it, they inspected it, and they just let it come on through, okay? By the way, this knife actually came from China, so that can be a bit of a concern. And I've been told, although I can't say I have this experience myself, but I've been told they pay a little more attention to packages coming in from countries that are less trusted. So China, Russia, any third world country, you could have more of an issue. Generally speaking, the US isn't going to raise as many red flags, but it still may. All right, so I just wanted to put that out there that the Tangram did come in from China. Okay, so moving on to my point, which is most knives do get through, okay? The fact is that CBSA's processing system is not like a ride program. And what I mean by that is, if you imagine a ride program, every single car going through the ride program is going to get stopped. You're going to have to open the window and the police cop is going to ask you something. Well, that's not how it works. All right, you have thousands upon thousands of packages rolling through the system on conveyor belts. And there's a bunch of sensors and infrared cameras and every other kind of, there's sensors that test for chemical signatures and all kinds of other things. And yeah, it'll have to pass through those sensors. And really, as long as a sensor doesn't key, you're going to be fine. Your package is coming through. Okay, so I wanted to put that out there because I definitely get the impression that some people feel like, a border agent is actively opening every single box and inspecting the contents. And that is not at all what's happening. All right, the only time they're going to open it and inspect the contents is if there's some trigger, okay, some key that sets them off. And that may be any number of things. Maybe it's just the fact that it says knife on the box. Maybe it's the cost. The cost is going to be the number one thing because keep in mind, by the way, I'm all the way down now to number 5, so I'll skip 5 when we get to it. But number 5 is declare a low value because CBSA is primarily a tax collection agency. Okay, what they're supposed to do is collect duty. That's their primary role. And so if you put, hey, this item costs $6,000, they are definitely stopping it. They are definitely taking a look at it to figure out how much duty you need to pay. If it costs $6, they're not that concerned about it. Okay, so keep that in mind for sure. Number 3, I repeat, do not use UPS or FedEx. It's pretty much guaranteed that your item is going to be stopped and examined if you use those services. Number 1, the volume is not as high. Okay, so where before I said, yeah, the thousands of packages coming through, well, UPS and FedEx don't have those same huge numbers coming through. So it's a little easier for the agents that are working with them to take a look at every single package. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. But number 2, both of those companies seem to have a department at the border whose sole job it is to take packages, put them in the hands of a CBSA agent and say, here, check this out, okay? Where USPS and Canada Post, they've just got thousands of packages rolling through an assembly line, all right? And you want the assembly line. You don't want the hand-to-hand contact. So don't go UPS or FedEx. There are other reasons as well. They tend to cost a lot more. And both of them, UPS charges an exorbitant fee just for carrying your item across the border, which is really, really frustrating. Number 4, you can take some measures. Okay, so if I was going to ship this across the border, there are some things that I could do. I can tighten this pivot so it doesn't flip as well as it normally does. In fact, I may even take this apart and remove the bearings altogether and replace it either with washers or with nothing so that I know now that this is not going to move very well. And the agent who investigates it, he's going to be trying to open this and he's like, yeah, this thing will not open. It really sucks. So it doesn't meet the criteria. Okay, because one of the things it says is that it has to, deploy into its fully locked position. So if the knife is flipping and it only opens this far, then it doesn't meet the criteria that they're using and it's going to be fine. All right, by the way, they tend to focus on assisted knives for sure. They really dislike assisted knives. And as I say, both of these were inspected by CBSA and came in just fine. So yeah, take some steps if you want to. Tighten the pivot, remove the bearings, zip tie the knife shut, tape it shut. I've seen packages come through where CBSA opened the box that it was shipping in, but then when they got to the knife box itself, okay, the Spyderco box or the Steel Wheel box or the Kaiser box or whatever, that box was sealed shut pretty good in a Ziploc bag or with duct tape or whatever. And so they just took a look at it and didn't actually open it and investigate and examine the item. So that's a worthwhile thing to do. Again, remember, thousands of packages, and these guys are just trying to clear them through, right? They're not, it's not like the CBSA agent is out there going, man, that Bill, I'm going to make sure I get his knife and stop it from getting to him. That's not what they're doing, okay? Now, I'm sure, like every branch of law enforcement, there are some guys who got into it for the wrong reasons and have bad attitudes about it, just like is true of the Mounties or of the OPP or any other, police agency, even soldiers. Okay, so that's all good. Number 6. I already talked about number 5. Number 6. That's another one I've already talked about. Make arrangements for what you'll do if something does get stopped. Number 7. Keep making noise about this issue. Okay, so keep saying, hey, talk to your member of parliament. Talk to anyone who will listen. I don't care if it's provincial or federal. Ralph Goodall or whoever else you want to talk to. Make them aware that this is happening and that it's stupid, okay? I know that there's not a lot of... Now, let's say this last thing, and I think this is pretty well true everywhere, whether you're in the States or Canada or Europe or wherever else. Honestly, there's not a lot of good public sentiment here, right? If you say to someone, the government is stopping knives from coming into the country, there's probably a large portion of the population that'll say, oh, that's good, right? And they're just ignorant, stupid people. And you're not going to change their mind very likely. You may change 1 or 2 or 3 individual minds and certainly try to do that. If you have the opportunity to make a valid, sound argument in front of any group of people, please, please do it. I complain to everyone I can about the stupidity of this particular issue and how CBSA and the CITT has completely bungled it. And are just stopping regular people from getting a cutting tool, which is completely insane. And of course, by the way, the one thing that you're not going to have any problems with is a fixed blade. And as I've said many, many times, right, this is always open. The minute I pick it up, it's open. So why on earth does it matter how a knife is deployed when I could just carry something like this and it's open all the time, right? It doesn't matter how fast your knife flicks, whether it's even an automatic or an OTF or whatever. It's not as fast as this because this is open every second, okay? So I know I've said that before, and I'm just going to put it out there one more time. The last thing is order from people who are good and will help you. And that's one of the reasons I keep saying, if you're Canadian, order from White Mountain Knives. Justin is a really good guy, and he does take some steps, some of the measures that I've outlined here, to help out with things coming across the border. The other thing is I'm fairly confident, at least it seems to me, that eBay and Amazon may have some kind of arrangement because those packages seem to come through without a second look. And I think that's because, eBay and Amazon have made some kind of arrangement with the Canadian government, with CBSA or with, Canada Post or US Postal Service or whatever, to help their items get through the border a little more smoothly. So there you go. That's really all the things that I would suggest, all the measures that I would take. And many times I don't do any of those things. All right, I just order it and hope for the best. And the fact is most things do get through. As I say, there's always a little bit of risk. And if it happens, excuse me, I'm just going to ship it back to whoever sent it to me and make alternate arrangements for getting that item. Okay. There you go. That's my thoughts on shipping knives into Canada. I know there's other things that we could talk about and other things that other people have said, but my experience has been that some of those other things are kind of wives' tales. And even some of the things I've shared with you maybe not 100% legit, but they're things that seem to work pretty well and seem to make some difference in whether or not your item gets through. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.